about that. We need change. We need to tax the rich and not the poor. We need to restructure the use of energy to save the environment and ourselves. We need less hogwash about affirmative action, because all this publicity given to affirmative action has convinced all sorts of people that women and people of color are looking for special treatment. Always be suspicious of an issue when the media gives it a lot of attention, because we know that affirmative action isn't the problem. The truth is, the real problem in this country is the persistent and virulent racism and sexism in training, recruitment, hiring, job evaluation, wages, salaries, and personal relations. And that's the struggle for equality. It's not for some special treatment. We need a health insurance program for the 35 million Americans who are not covered. I mean, isn't that amazing? Isn't it time for an investigation? How could that be? How did that come about? Why? We need people who not only bemoan these things, like the liberals say, isn't it a shame, the homeless? Isn't it a shame, not enough adequate health care? Isn't it a shame? You have to stop complaining about that. You have to start asking, but why does that exist? What are the forces that allow in the richest country in the world these kinds of terrible inhumanities and inequalities? And not just national health insurance, we need a national health program for everyone. We need some relief from the evasive, fatuous, mealy-mouthed, know-it-all anti-communist media pundits and conservative columnists, the gas bags who sit there. You see them now with elections? Here's some candidates who are trying to talk about the issues, most notably Jesse Jackson. And what do these guys do? They have become theater critics. The show is over and they say, well, Bob, what do you think? Well, I thought his delivery was very good. He seemed calm. He had a good rapport with the audience, and he used that one thing very effectively. Yes, he did. He ran into a little trouble. On the other hand, Senator Zollern seemed not quite had it together today. He seemed like he probably tired because he's been on the road so long. Yes, I think that's what it was. And I'm sitting there and saying, what the hell have I got to hear this for? What is this theater critic stuff? They don't talk about the issue. They talk about process. In fact, they talk about talking about process. The airwaves of this country, ladies and gentlemen, are the property of the people of the United States. That may come as a surprise to some network bosses, but it's true. And those airwaves should be opened up. There should be public access television. We need exposure to a socialist perspective. We need exposure to various dissident perspectives in the mainstream media. Not just, as I say, ideas are mediated through a social structure, and some of them get the mass market, and some of them are left for very small and select audiences. And we need discussion of worker-controlled enterprises and public ownership. We need a national debate in the mainstream media on the oppressive, unjust purposes of U.S. foreign policy in the Third World and elsewhere. We need to re-examine our institutions, our schools, our colleges, hospitals, museums. We've got to find out why all those institutions, our media, why they are all dominated by self-selected boards of trustees or regents who are answerable to no one but themselves and who control all spending, all hiring, and all other policies. We need a government that has the capacity to go directly into not-for-profit production. If private industry can't provide the needs of the people, if the utilities can't give you electricity without jacking up the rates every year, jacking it up again and again, then take it away from the utilities and the people themselves can do it themselves. If private industry can't build us homes and hospitals and get jobs, then let the public sector do it. There's all these people who need work. There's all this work that needs to be done. There's all this capital that can be used to do it, and none of it's come together because there's no profits in it for the Morgans and the Rockefellers and the DuPonts. So then let the public sector do it, not for profit, and it will get done. And when it gets done, it creates social income, it creates private income, it expands your tax base, it creates public income, and it creates more opportunities for growth. The danger with that, the danger is not that it won't work, the danger is that it does work. And that's why they stop it, that's why they want privatization, that's why they sell off Conrail at 1/3 its actual value, because Conrail under public ownership was working, and those railroads under private ownership were milked like cows, milked and run down, and then they turn around to the government, they turn around to the taxpayer, and then they go socialist after they've milked it down and it's about to fall apart, and they say, we can't run it anymore, you're going to have to take it over. And the taxpayers take it over, and they dig deeper into their pockets, and they pay for it, and they put it back on a working basis, a rational basis, a not-for-profit basis, so that the money it makes goes back into it and doesn't go out to the George Bushes and the Ronald Reagans and their class. And then when it works, Ronald Reagan says, we got to sell this thing. And he sells it not because it wasn't working, but because it does work. We need to open up our political system, ladies and gentlemen. We need to have new parties. Not just two capitalist parties, not just two anti-communist parties, not just one party that red baits and liberal baits, and another party that lives in fear of being red baited and liberal baited. We need to do what the Sandinistas in Nicaragua have done, which is have proportional representation, so that if a minority party wins 11% of the vote in Nicaragua, it gets 11% of the seats in the National Assembly. They don't tell you that in the media. Ronald Reagan hasn't dwelled on that fact, has he? As the Sandinistas have done, we need funding for minority parties. We need free TV time for minority parties. Conservatives palm themselves off as being more patriotic than liberals. Liberals think they're more patriotic than socialists and others on the left. But we on the left are second to no one in our patriotism. We want perestroika, we want fundamental restructuring and democratization of overseas and domestic policies. We want a restructuring and democratization of the political process, the values, institutions, the economy, and the class power of this country. We real patriots say, along with Albert Camus, I want to love my country and justice too. And in fact, I believe that the only way you can be a real patriot is to love justice. Because you can't be patriotic to something that's unjust. We want to spend less time trying to save the world with bombers and battleships and more time healing ourselves. This is not just a good idea or a noble pronouncement. It is a historical necessity. This country does not belong to Ronald Reagan and his billionaire friends, although they act like it does. It belongs to us, and sooner or later we will take it back. Thank you.